Hi, my second grade friends. It's Mrs. Real here with another story from ancient China for you. This one has got gorgeous illustrations. And I just realized that the illustrator is a man, his name is Robert Sabuda, who does really intricate pop-up books. And so a couple years ago at the Tucson Festival of Books, he was here. I happen to own several of his books, The Wizard of Oz. I have like 3 of them. And so when you open up the pages and the little hand cut paper things are just amazingly awesome. So this doesn't have the pop-up part of it, but the pages do fold out. So I'm going to be working really hard to get you all of the space underneath my document camera. I'm also getting smarter because I've learned to turn the light down a little bit, so maybe we won't have the glare. So now as I go to share my screen, this story is called The Paper Dragon. The author is Marguerite Davol. And as I said, the illustrator is Robert Sabuda. The Paper Dragon. So here are some Chinese characters. This character stands for courage. This character stands for loyalty. This character stands for love. And this character stands for sincerity. And running through here, I see the tail of a dragon. Can you imagine learning how to write like this when you were in kindergarten and the ABCs were kind of tricky? Yeah, that would be hard. Long, long ago, there lived a humble artist named Mi Fei. Between each day's sunrise and sunset, Mi Fei would dip his narrow brushes in colored inks and paint on paper scrolls. He loved to paint the glorious past, scenes of the gods and their festivals, portraits of great heroes and their deeds. People from far beyond his village came to buy Mi Fei's scrolls so they could learn about their gods and heroes as one would learn from books. But the artist cared nothing for the fame his paintings brought him. He was a simple man, content to live and work in his own village. When children crowded his windows to watch him paint, Mi Fei would call to them, "Come in!" When neighbors appeared at his door, he put his brushes aside, ready to listen to their latest tale of triumph or woe. Mi Fei was happy, surrounded by people he loved. So here's the picture of people watching him, but if I unfold the page, you can see this incredibly long, beautiful scroll that he is working on. One morning, Mi Fei's work was interrupted by shouts outside his window. "A messenger! A messenger!" people cried as they ran past. Brush in hand, Mi Fei rushed to join his neighbors in the village square. The messenger, Mu Wang, brought distressing news. "The great dragon of Lung Mountain, Sui Hin, has awakened from its 100-year sleep and is loose upon the land," the messenger gasped. "Its huge legs have trampled rice fields into mud, and the winds created by its lashing tail have uprooted the mulberry trees, destroying the silkworms. Sui Zhen's fiery breath has scorched the tea leaves on the bushes. Villages everywhere are in ruins." "Someone must face the dragon," Muang warned the crowd. "Someone must convince it to sleep once more, or your village too will be crushed under the weight of Sui Hin." So again, if I open the page, now you can see the dragon wreaking havoc. So this looks like it also might be cut paper put down on top of another paper. The frightened people murmured among themselves, "Was anyone in their village brave enough and clever enough to confront a dragon?" One by one, they turned to Mi Fei. "You know all about gods and heroes," one of the villagers said. "Surely you can find a way to stop Sui Hin." Mi Fei shook his head. "I am no hero," he protested. "Only a simple artist who paints the past. All I know of heroic deeds has been told to me by others. but the villagers crowded around him, pleading for his help. Looking into their worried faces, he knew he could not refuse. So there's a few of them, but then as I open the page, it seems like all of the villagers are there. The next morning, Mifei tucked some rice cakes into his pack, along with brushes, paper, and ink. He bundled up his painted scrolls to bring him comfort. Knowing he might never see his friends and neighbors again, Mifei looked around his beloved village one last time. Then he sadly set off for Lung Mountain. Through valleys and across streams, Mifei walked, stopping only to pick a few berries to eat or to quench his thirst at a spring. After many hours, he reached Lung Mountain. Mifei stared upward. Smoke and flames billowed from the mountaintop, and enormous rocks bounded down the steep slopes. Mifei was frightened, but up he climbed until he stood at Lung Mountain's peak. Thick mist swirled around him. So here he is saying goodbye to the villagers. And here he is drinking water from the stream. And then he's climbing the mountain up into the swirling mist. Boy, I have a tickle in my throat today. Then through the mist, with a rumbling roar so loud, Mifei thought his head would burst, the dragon appeared. Ha! Who dares to disturb Sui Huen, the source of fire, the heart of the mountain? Mifei trembled. He turned to run away from the terrifying sight, but the worried faces of the villagers filled his mind, and Mifei turned back to face the dragon. He bowed low and managed to say, I am Mifei, a humble painter of scrolls. Bright fire spurted from the dragon's nostrils, hot on Mifei's face. The wind from its lashing tail nearly blew him off his feet, but somehow Mifei was able to stand his ground. Please, Sui Huen, the villages below are in ruins. You have scorched the tea leaves and trampled the rice, leaving nothing for people to eat or drink. You have uprooted the mulberry trees, and the silkworms are dying, leaving nothing for people to wear or sell. I beg of you, return to your sleep of 100 years. There's that scary dragon face. Right? Look at how big he is compared to our hero here, Mifei. Big old claws. Huge scales glistened as the dragon coiled itself into a tight circle. Its red eyes glowed. Ha! Mifei, know that before I return to my ageless slumber, someone must perform 3 tasks. Until then, thundered the dragon, its forked tongue flickering in and out, I must prowl the countryside, trampling and burning all in my path. Mifei sighed. Could a simple artist stop Sui Shen's devastation? His voice very small, Mifei asked the dragon, What are the 3 tasks? Sui Huan's terrible teeth clicked once, twice. First, tell me, Mifei, the beast said, what is the most important thing your people have created? The artist answered without thinking, paper, he said, the paper on which I paint my scenes. Paper? Indeed, the dragon howled with laughter. The first task, then, is to bring me fire, wrapped in paper. Go, do this before sunset, or I must devour you. That was one scary-looking big dragon compared to one small man. So he has to bring the dragon fire wrapped in paper. Mifei crouched behind a large rock, seeking shelter from the dragon. He shook his head. How can I carry out Sui Wen's task? He said to himself. Impossible! It was foolish to say paper. Important as it is to me, instead of brass or tin. But paper? Mifei looked down at the bundle of scrolls he had carried from his village. People far and wide learn of their history from my paper scrolls, he thought. Perhaps knowing about the past can help me find answers for the present. Mifei unrolled one scroll after another, looking at each of them carefully. On one scroll, he had painted a celebration of light, the festival of the first full moon. Mifei smiled as he examined the scene. Then he took out his small knife and cut the paper scroll, folding and fashioning it into a different shape. So here's his bag that's been carrying his scrolls and his brushes, his inks. And this is the one he was looking at. It's a festival. Look at what all those people have on sticks. It's a clue. Before the sun slid from sight, Mifei returned to face Sui Wen. Although nervous so close to the dragon, he took a candle stump from his pack and lit the wick from Sui Wen's fiery breath. Mifei placed the burning candle inside the paper lantern he had made. The dragon laughed, and the flame in its nostrils died to a wisp of smoke. Mifei knew he had succeeded. But then Sui Wen began to whip its heavy tail back and forth so violently that the clouds in the sky were swept away. Your second task is to bring me the wind captured by paper, the dragon roared. Do this before noon tomorrow, or I must devour you. So down here at the bottom, you can see him holding a paper lantern that he had cut out of his scroll. So it has holes in it, kind of like the dragon does, and the light shines right on through. So the fire died down from the dragon's nose, but the wind from his tail is still kicking it. Mifei slept very little that night. He had solved the first task. The second seemed far more difficult. Can my scrolls help me again? He asked himself over and over. In morning's orange glow, he again unrolled his scrolls, one after another. Mifei stared at one, a hero's rescue of a beautiful princess lost in the hot desert, then nodded. Quickly, he took out his small knife and cut the paper scroll, folding and fashioning it into a new shape. So he's cutting something from paper that's to capture wind with paper. It has something to do with a hero rescuing a princess lost in the desert. Shall we find out? What did he give to the princess because she was lost in the hot desert? That captures wind with paper. Are you right? Mifei found the dragon resting, its eyes closed. He approached the scaly beast and with the folded paper began to fan its face. The wind captured in the fan tickled Sui Wen. Opening its eyes, the dragon laughed once more and lazily uncoiled its massive tail. Mifei knew he had succeeded again. But almost instantly, Sui Wen opened its red eyes wide and bellowed, Your third task is to bring me the strongest thing in the world, carried in paper. Do this before sundown, or I must devour you. I don't think I would argue with this dude. So the first task was fire in paper, and he made a lantern that he put a candle in. The second task was moving air with bringing wind with paper, so he made a fan. Now he has to bring the strongest thing in the world carried in paper. It's now noon. He has until nighttime. Mifei hurried back to the shelter of the rock. The strongest thing in the world, he repeated. Is it Sweden? Or the rock I now lean against? What huge, heavy thing can be carried in paper? His scrolls had saved him twice, and Mifei once again unrolled each one, searching for an answer. But no matter how hard he looked, this time not one of the scrolls offered Mifei a solution. He set them aside, disheartened. Surely Shui Zhen will devour me at sundown, he said. Resigned, Mifei reached into his pack and took out his brushes, paper, and inks. He began to paint, certain that it would be for the last time. But he did not paint scenes of gods or heroes. Instead, Mifei painted what was closest to his heart, what he cherished most. He began to paint the people of his village, young and old, men, women, and children. So here he is, busy painting. Mifei worked until the sun arced low in the west, then wearily laid his brushes aside. He looked at the familiar world he had recreated, the faces of friends and neighbors he loved. Words began to crowd into his head, take shape, and become a poem. Mifei picked up his brush and made the poem a part of his painting. When he had finished, Mifei looked for a long time at what he had created. Then he smiled and nodded. He knew what he would do. This time, Mifei did not cut the paper or fold it into a new shape. Instead, he carefully rolled up the scroll and tied it with a red ribbon. So there's the beginning of this painting. And there's the red ribbon that he wrapped around it. Do you think you know the answer to this one? Does he win this third challenge? I better hope so, because look at those teeth. Once again, Mifei trudged along the narrow mountain path. The enormous beast lay waiting, its great length coiled around and around the mountaintop. Opening its wide mouth lined with pointed yellow teeth, the dragon said, "Well, am I to eat you for dinner?" Mifei held out the picture he had created and said in a clear, firm voice, "Love can move mountains, stretch the sky, calm the sea. Love brings light and life." There's the poem right there that he wrote on his painting. Do you love how you're looking at it from inside the dragon's mouth with all those teeth around? Do you think that was it? Do you think he's won? When he had finished, Mifei looked into Shui Zhen's eyes. He was astonished to see that the dragon was shrinking. In a whisper, rather than a roar, Shui Zhen said, "Thank you, Mifei. You have found the way for me to sleep once more. Truly, the strongest thing in the world is love." With that, the dragon became smaller and smaller until, with a flip of its tail, Shui Zhen disappeared. In its place, Mifei found a small paper dragon. He carefully placed it within the scroll to take back to his village. You see him shrinking, 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 until he's now just something he can hold in his hand. For the rest of his long life, Mifei continued to paint the gods and their festivals, to portray the exploits of great heroes. He continued to paint portraits of the villagers he knew and loved. But whenever he painted, he always drew a small dragon in one corner to remind everyone of the strongest thing in the world. That end. So for a guy who didn't think he could do any of this, I think he did a really nice job. So the strongest thing in the world is love, wrapped in paper. So he painted the things that he loved, the people that he loved, and it worked so that the dragon went back to sleep for another 100 years. I hope you liked that story, my friends, and maybe you could try some paper cutting if you have access to the computer when somebody else doesn't need to use it for all their work or school. You might want to Google Robert Sabuda, Sabuda, and check out some of his paperwork that he does. It's pretty exciting. I will see you again soon with another planting story. Bye-bye.